They called me lucky. The kind of lucky every woman dreamed of. You really got yourself a good man. Amara, my aunt had said at our wedding, holding both my hands like she was handing me over to paradise. Daniel was handsome, successful, attentive, the kind of man who opened doors, remembered birthdays, and brought roses on Wednesdays, just because. In the beginning, it was perfect. He listened when I talked. He kissed my forehead like it was sacred. He cooked better than me, and never made me feel ashamed about it. Our wedding was beautiful, our honeymoon warm and playful. I came back glowing. The first shift was subtle. "Why are you still talking to Muna?" he asked one evening, as we drove home from dinner. "She's always single and bitter. You don't need that energy around you." I didn't think much of it. I stopped talking to Muna. Then he started correcting the way I dressed. "You don't need to wear that, babe. It's tight. You don't want to give the wrong impression. You used to love this dress," I laughed. "Yeah, but you're my wife now. I just want to protect you." That word, protect, it sounded like love, so I let it slide. After I got pregnant with our first child, Tari, the changes came faster. He wanted me home more, said I shouldn't be stressing with office work, said a real man provides. I smiled, grateful for the break. I didn't see what was happening. I was being erased, gently, lovingly, completely. The night it started for real. I had come home late from a prenatal appointment. He was already angry, said I didn't tell him where I was going. I showed him the hospital note, even the prescription. He tossed it aside like it meant nothing. Then he grabbed my arm, not hard, just firm, his voice low. "You don't go anywhere without telling me. Do you understand me?" I did what I always did. I nodded. I apologized. The push didn't come until after the baby arrived. Tari was just 3 months old. I was exhausted, my hair a mess, clothes stained with milk. I forgot to defrost the meat for dinner. I said I'd cook something else. That night he exploded. "You don't do anything in this house. What are you good for, Amara?" He shoved the plate off the table, then shoved me. I hit the edge of the chair and fell hard. And just like that, he broke. He cried, held my face, kissed my bruised lip, begged me to forgive him, said he was tired, that I pushed him. And just like that, I forgave him. Because I was tired too, because I believed him, because I didn't want Tari to grow up in a broken home. But deep inside I knew something had broken, and love shouldn't hurt like this. You can only hide bruises for so long before they start to show in places makeup can't reach. After that night, Daniel changed briefly. He brought me flowers again, bought me a necklace to show how sorry he was. He even made my favorite yam porridge and spoon-fed me, while Tari napped beside us on the couch. "I'm working on myself," he whispered, and I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. But healing isn't in grand gestures. It's in daily choices. And Daniel chose anger again and again. It wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was the silence, the kind that freezes a room, makes you question your worth. Other times it was his voice, sharp, demeaning, calculated. "You're getting fat," he said one morning while I struggled to zip my dress. "Do you just sit around eating all day while I work myself to death?" "I just had a baby," I replied too softly. "Yeah, and you're still acting like you're 9 months in." I stopped dressing up after that. I stopped taking selfies. I stopped looking in mirrors. Daniel didn't like me working anymore. Said it made him feel disrespected. So I quit. I sold my work laptop and used the money to buy diapers and baby wipes. My bank account shrank, but my silence grew. That's when I started journaling. In a notebook I hid inside an old shoebox under the bed. I wrote down everything. The way he yanked my wrist when I spoke too loud. How he once locked me outside in the rain because I forgot to switch off the bathroom light. The nights he came home drunk and yelled at our son for crying too loudly. The cracks in our glass life were becoming harder to ignore. One day, I visited my mother. I wore a long-sleeved blouse even though it was hot outside. She noticed the marks near my wrist. "Amara, is everything okay at home?" I smiled. "Of course, Mama, you know Daniel loves me." She watched me carefully, the way mothers do when they know their children are lying. "You can always come home," she said quietly. I laughed it off. "Don't worry. Things are just stressful, we're adjusting." But I was adjusting too much, shrinking too often, explaining too many things that couldn't be explained. That night, as I washed dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, lips pressed in a straight line. That wasn't the woman Daniel married. That wasn't even me. But I didn't leave. I looked down the hallway at Tari's tiny room. I thought about custody battles, court hearings, him growing up without both parents. So I stayed. For him, even as the glass cracked wider, and I stood barefoot in its shards. Tari's first birthday was coming up, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe, in some way, I thought celebrating him would erase the tension in the house, at least for a day. I spent all night baking his favorite banana cake from scratch, hanging little blue and white balloons, wrapping the small gifts we could afford. Daniel said we shouldn't throw a party. What does a 1-year-old care about cake and decorations? He barked. But I needed the joy. I needed the noise. I needed something to interrupt the silence that had settled between us like fog. The guests came, just a few family members and friends from church. I smiled, laughed, even danced when the music played. I carried Tari in my arms as everyone sang, "Happy Birthday." He clapped with his tiny hands and laughed when we blew out the candle together. But what no one saw, what no one ever saw, was the bruise beneath the makeup on my left cheekbone. That morning, Daniel had slapped me. It wasn't about anything major, just that I'd placed his shirt on the wrong side of the closet. He said I was doing it on purpose to upset him. Before I could speak, his palm met my face with a thud so sharp, I dropped the cup I was holding. Then, like always, he apologized. Promised it wouldn't happen again. Again. I iced my face, applied concealer 3 layers thick, and kept going. The party had to happen for Tari. That evening, after the guests left, I cleaned the kitchen quietly, while Daniel watched football in the living room. The smell of fried rice still lingered in the air, and Tari was asleep in his crib with a smile on his face, completely unaware of the world his mother was living in. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but how do you explain that you're drowning in a house full of air? How do you say, "He hit me," when everyone keeps saying how lucky you are? The next day at church, a woman approached me, Sister Helen. She hugged me tightly and held my shoulders back to look me in the eye. "You look tired, Amara. Everything okay?" I nodded, just new mother stuff. But I saw the hesitation in her eyes. Like she wanted to ask more, like she knew. I went home that night and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. Not the makeup, not the bruise. Just me, who I used to be, who I'd become. I touched the bruise gently, as if to confirm I still had feeling there. And then I whispered, "This can't be normal." But normal is what you get used to. And I was getting used to pain. The days began to blend together. Wake up, feed Tari, clean the house. Watch Daniel's mood, avoid mistakes, apologize for existing, repeat. It was like I was living in a quiet prison, one where I made the meals, folded the sheets, and smiled through the bars. Daniel didn't need to lock me in. He knew I wouldn't dare leave. He used fear like a leash, and I wore it like jewelry. Sometimes, he didn't touch me for weeks. Those were the weeks I allowed myself to hope. Hope that the worst had passed. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he was changing. But change doesn't live in silence. It lurks in his eyes when I say the wrong thing, in the tension of his jaw when dinner isn't ready on time, in the way he squeezes Tari's toys when he's frustrated, holding them just a little too tightly. One night, I made the mistake of asking for airtime, just 200 to recharge my phone. He stared at me, the remote clenched in his hand. "What do you need airtime for?" he asked. "I want to check in on my mom. She's been unwell." He chuckled, low and cruel. "Is she paying your bills now?" "No, I just..." Before I could finish, he flung the remote across the room. It smashed against the wall, leaving a dent. Tari, startled by the noise, began to cry from his crib. Daniel stood up, towering over me. His voice dropped to a whisper that cut sharper than a scream. "Next time, ask yourself if what you're about to say is worth a broken bone." Then he walked away, as if he hadn't just threatened the mother of his child. I sat there for a while, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the wall. I didn't move until Tari's cries pulled me from the fog. I ran to him, picked him up, and held him tight, tears falling freely onto his tiny shoulder. Later that night, I took my notebook from under the bed and wrote in it, "This house is no longer a home. It's a war zone, and I'm the only one without a weapon." The next morning, Daniel acted like nothing happened, kissed me on the forehead, handed me money for groceries, and told me to buy myself something nice. I smiled, I nodded. I walked to the market and stared blankly at the vegetables. Even the trader noticed. "You look tired, sister," she said kindly. "Everything okay?" I opened my mouth to lie, but the words stuck. What would I even say? That I was trapped. That I was too ashamed to tell my parents. That I was staying for the sake of a child who deserved better. So I bought some yams, smiled politely, and walked home, right back into the quiet prison. And I told myself again, "Just hold on, Amara. Do it for Tari." But each day, that lie got harder to believe. It happened after one of his worst outbursts. He'd come home late, reeking of beer, muttering under his breath. I could feel it building from the moment he walked through the door, the tension. The storm, he didn't like the look of the food. Said it was cold, called it trash. Then pushed the plate to the floor, and made me clean it up like I was a dog. That night, he didn't just slap me. He shoved me into the kitchen counter, so hard my ribs ached for days. But then came the roses. A bouquet of 12 red roses. A bottle of wine, and a note. I'm sorry, Amara, let's find us again. He came home early the next evening, showered, dressed nicely, and took me to a quiet guest house outside town. Said he wanted to reconnect. Said I looked beautiful in the dress I hadn't worn since our honeymoon. For a moment I felt seen, desired, safe. We talked, we laughed, we even made love. And for those few hours, I started to believe. Maybe things were turning around. Maybe the old Daniel wasn't gone. Maybe he was buried under the weight of stress and disappointment. Maybe the love I once knew was still there. He cooked for me that Sunday. He played with Tari in the living room. He even called my mother and greeted her warmly. Like a man trying to redeem himself. He started praying with us again. Quoted scriptures about forgiveness. About second chances. I wanted to believe. I clung to that version of him, like a drowning woman grabs driftwood. Even though deep down, I could feel it wasn't solid enough to carry me for long. Then 3 days later, it started again. He got a call from an old business partner, who was apparently succeeding without him. The envy twisted his face. That night, he drank too much and blamed me. Said I was the distraction that ruined his focus. That I was the reason his life had lost momentum. I didn't argue. I just held Tari a little closer that night. The next morning, he barely looked at me. The flowers had withered on the dining table, and the wine bottle stood empty on the kitchen counter, unbothered. Like none of it had happened. That was when I realized, this is the cycle. Rage, apology, romance, hope, disappointment, rage again. False hope is the most dangerous kind. It binds you tighter than fear. Because when you believe there's still something worth saving, you'll keep trying to save it, even if it's killing you. I wrote that in my journal that night. He gave me flowers, but I'm still bleeding. The only thing he's good at reviving is the pain. And yet I stayed. Because I didn't know how to leave. Because leaving meant explaining. Because part of me still hoped that love could fix what love had broken. It started with a silence. At first, I thought Tari was just going through a phase. He was almost 3, words should have been flowing by now. But instead, my son, once bubbly and curious, had become withdrawn and quiet. He didn't babble as much. He stopped singing along to cartoons. Sometimes, he stared off into space, his little body frozen like he was holding his breath. I asked Daniel if he'd noticed. He shrugged. Boys take longer. He'll talk when he wants to. Stop overthinking. But it wasn't just the silence. Tari flinched when Daniel entered the room. He would cling to me, hiding behind my legs when his father raised his voice, even when it wasn't directed at him. At night, he began waking up crying, calling out "Mama," in a panicked voice soaked in sweat. I knew the signs. I saw the fear in his eyes. And it broke me. At a routine checkup, the pediatrician asked if I had concerns. I wanted to say it then. I wanted to scream it. He's scared of his father. He's watching me live in terror, and it's breaking him. But I just smiled and said, he's quiet these days. The doctor recommended a child therapist. I nodded, knowing Daniel would never approve it. He didn't believe in wasting money on feelings. A few weeks later, I got a call from Tari's preschool teacher. Mrs. Okafor, she said gently, has Tari experienced anything traumatic at home? My blood ran cold. Why do you ask? She hesitated. He doesn't speak in class. At all. And yesterday, he drew something during art time. It was very concerning. She sent me a picture. It was a rough crayon sketch of a tall, angry man. A smaller figure, clearly a child, was crying in a corner. Between them, a woman lay on the ground. I felt the air leave my lungs. That night, Daniel was in a good mood. Football match had gone his way. He called me over, laughing, reaching for my waist. I pulled back. What's wrong with you now? He asked. I didn't answer. I was thinking about that drawing. About Tari's silence. About the legacy of pain I was handing my son on a silver platter. That night when Daniel fell asleep, I took my journal and wrote, "This house is eating my son alive. He doesn't have bruises, but he's bleeding inside. And I'm the one handing him the knife." I looked at Tari through the baby monitor, curled up like a question mark, sucking his thumb. I had stayed for him, but staying was slowly breaking him. And that truth was becoming too heavy to carry. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays used to be Daniel's light days. He'd come home early. Sometimes he'd bring roasted corn or suya from the roadside vendor. Sometimes, if I was lucky, he wouldn't bring his anger home at all. But not this Thursday. That morning, the tension was already there, thick. Unspoken, heavy. He didn't like the shirt I ironed. Said the collar was limp. Slammed the door so hard on his way out that the frame rattled. Still, I hoped the day would end quietly. It didn't. He came home around 9:30 p.m., drunk. I smelled the alcohol before he even opened the door. He stumbled in, mumbling about how everyone was ungrateful, how no one respected him anymore. I kept my voice soft. I made dinner, it's still warm. I didn't ask you to cook, he snapped. Did I ask for your pity? He kicked the chair. The sound startled Tari, who peeked out from the hallway. I ran to block his view. Go back to your room, baby, I whispered. Close the door. Daniel saw the exchange. You hide him from me now, he growled. You think I'm a monster. I didn't answer. I was too busy watching his hands, how they curled into fists. You think I don't see how you look at me like I'm the enemy. You think you're better than me. I backed up slowly, trying to put space between us. Daniel, please, I said. You're not yourself right now, just go lie down. He charged forward. I turned to run toward the kitchen, but he grabbed my wrist, too tightly. I screamed, struggled. My elbow slammed into the cabinet. He let go, but only to push me back. I reached for the doorframe to catch my fall. That's when it happened. He grabbed the heavy front door and slammed it shut. Without realizing my right hand was still on the edge. The sound was sickening, a crack. Then fire, not literal fire, but pain so white-hot I couldn't even cry out. I dropped to the floor, clutching my arm, blood pouring from where bone pushed against skin. Daniel froze. I screamed. Tari screamed from his room. And Daniel, he ran. Out the door, down the steps, into the darkness. I passed out before the neighbors arrived. When I woke up in the hospital, my mother was there, her eyes were red. Her voice cracked when she spoke. Amara, they had to take the hand. It was crushed too badly. I looked down at the bandaged stump. And that's when it hit me. I stayed to protect my children. But in doing so, I sacrificed myself. And now, I didn't just lose a hand. I lost time. I lost safety. I lost the chance to leave before it got this far. The room was too white, the lights too bright. The beeping of machines pierced the silence like a cruel reminder that I was alive, but not whole. I turned my head slowly. My mother was sitting beside the hospital bed, clutching my left hand in both of hers, whispering prayers through tears. She looked older, like the past few days had taken 10 years off her life. Mama, I croaked, my throat dry. She looked up, startled, and leaned in. Amara, oh thank God. I glanced down at my body, tubes, bandages, my arm elevated, swaddled in white. But something was wrong. My right hand was gone. I blinked again. Where's? Mama broke down in tears. They tried. Baby, the doctors tried, but it was crushed too badly. The bones, the nerves, everything, they had to amputate. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stared. A cold numbness spread across my chest. It was like my mind couldn't register the loss yet. As if it were a bad dream I hadn't fully woken up from. Gone. My hand, my dominant hand. I thought of Tari, of how I used to button his tiny shirts, tie his shoelaces, hold his hand when crossing the street. Would he be afraid of me now? Would I ever feel normal again? The police came later that day. Daniel was gone, disappeared. Neighbors said they saw him run, but no one knew where. A warrant was issued, photos circulated. But deep down I knew. He wouldn't come back, cowards never do. I stayed in the hospital for a week. My mother brought Tari to visit, and he clung to me like a baby monkey. He looked at the bandage, then at me. Did Daddy do that? He asked softly. I froze. I wanted to protect him, but the truth was no longer something I could hide behind. Yes, baby, I whispered, but he's not going to hurt us anymore. I filed for divorce the next morning. There was no more staying for the kids. No more waiting for change. No more praying for a man who left me bleeding and broken. My silence had cost me my hand. It would not cost me my son. The community was shocked. People sent flowers. A few offered apologies for never noticing. Others offered pity dressed up as sympathy. He didn't seem the type. You always looked so happy. But I was done pretending. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see weakness anymore. I saw a survivor. Wounded, yes, but awake. And sometimes, waking up is the beginning of freedom, even if it comes after losing a piece of yourself. The day I left our home for good, it rained. Fitting, I thought. Like the sky itself was washing the past away. My mother held Tari in the front seat, while I rode quietly in the back of her old Toyota. A bag of clothes, my journal, the little life I had managed to salvage, was packed into 3 boxes in the trunk. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The court had granted a temporary restraining order against Daniel. Though he hadn't been found, his phone was off. His accounts were untouched. Like a ghost, he had vanished, leaving behind only scars, unpaid bills, and the memory of every bruise he once said sorry for. I moved in with Mama, back into the room I once called mine. It felt strange, small, humbling, but it was safe, and for the first time in years, I could sleep without waiting for a door to slam in the middle of the night. Tari adjusted quickly, too quickly. That scared me more than anything. He didn't ask for his father. He just clung to me, always watching my face for permission to laugh, to speak, to breathe. The trauma lived in his silence. We started therapy together. Slowly, gently, we learned how to speak again. About feelings, about fears, about memories I wished he never had to carry. And me, I began to heal, piece by piece. I learned to use my left hand to write, to eat, to dress. Everything took longer. But every success, no matter how small, was mine. People started calling me strong. "You're such a strong woman," they'd say with those eyes full of pity. "I don't know how you did it." I didn't feel strong. I felt late. Too late to stop the damage to my son. Too late to avoid losing a part of myself. Too late to hold on to the dreams I once had of what life would be. But I was alive. And that counted for something. One day, while cleaning out the box of my things, I found my journal. The last page I had written was dated just before the hospital. It read, "If I don't leave now, I may not survive the next time." I closed the book and cried. For the woman who had written that. For the pain she endured, for the hand she lost. And for the strength she never knew she had. That night, I tucked Tari in and kissed his forehead. "I'm sorry I stayed too long," I whispered, "but I promise we're safe now." And in the silence that followed, I finally believed it. I had left. And though I lost so much, I still had the chance to rebuild. Sometimes, I wake up reaching for a hand that's no longer there. It's strange, the way the body remembers. How trauma sits in your bones, long after the bruises fade. My mind knows the hand is gone. But in dreams, I still feel it. I still clench a fist that isn't there. I still hold things that fall right through phantom fingers. But that's not the part that hurts the most. It's Tari. He's 5 now, brighter, more talkative. He laughs more, he sings again. His drawings are colorful now, full of trees and sunshine, and silly stick figures holding hands. But sometimes, he still stares off into space, his tiny face clouded by memories too big for his age. He doesn't remember every detail, but his soul does. Trauma leaves fingerprints on the heart, and no amount of therapy scrubs it clean completely. I stayed for him. I endured the slaps, the silence, the suffocating fear, because I thought growing up with both parents was better than growing up in a broken home. But I was wrong. He saw more than he should have, heard more than I knew, felt every vibration of violence in the walls and in my voice when I tried to pretend everything was fine. And when I left, it was already too late to undo what he'd seen. People still call me brave, but bravery would have been leaving the first time, speaking up sooner, choosing myself when the bruises were emotional, not physical. Still, I forgive myself now. I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't realize that staying for your children is sometimes the very thing that scars them the most. I didn't understand that silence is its own kind of violence, and that love should never have to be proven through suffering. I've learned to live differently now, one slow day at a time. I volunteer at a women's center, talking to women who sit where I once sat. They look at me with wide eyes when I roll up my sleeve, and they see the prosthetic. It's not fancy, just functional, but it tells a story. Not of weakness, but of survival. They ask, "How did you know it was time to leave?" And I say, "When it cost me my hand." They ask, "Would you go back and do it differently?" And I say, "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes, I would have left at the first sign of cruelty. Because pain doesn't turn into love. And monsters don't turn into saviors." I lost a hand, but I gained my life back. And though it came at a price, I remind myself every day, I didn't escape too early. I just escaped before it killed me. Some women don't get to tell their stories. Some women are silenced forever. So I'll keep telling mine, over and over, until the next Amara hears it and runs. Before it's too late.